Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this latest edition of RE106, where I take stories I've narrated and update them to modern audio standards. This particular story is called The Drunk, written by Lostfol. At the far end of the bar, the disheveled and smelly creature sat. He was slowly working his way through the strongest stuff they had, and while its impact showed, he somehow kept going. Gorath had been a bartender and bouncer for a long time, and while the raggedy clothing caused him to think the creature was a bum, he was beginning to realize something wasn't right. For starters, he kept his tab paid. He also had started showing up about a week ago, always appearing at about 1700 and leaving at around 2100. He also seemed to always head to the same seat at the end of the bar. This creature was a race he wasn't familiar with. He seemed to have no interest in the company. While its race was obviously supposed to be bisymmetrical from appearances, what little of its face was visible under the hood was definitely asymmetrical, as though it had a severe damage and had been rebuilt rather than healed. A fake eye was apparent, glowing slightly red. He had already put away enough hard alcohol to kill most species, but he hardly seemed even fazed beyond the slight glassiness to the one real eye. That eye also had that 1,000-yard stare often seen in former combat soldiers, emergency medics, and others with horrors in their past. "About done, buddy?" he asked as he approached the patron. The creature jerked slightly, as though just noticing him. Without a word, he held up its glass for a refill. Gorath had his credit chit and knew there was plenty on it to cover the cost. The bar was almost empty, so Gorath didn't have much else to do, so he started pouring another. He was a little shocked as he brought it over to hear his gravelly voice. "Thank you, sir." After seeing this being nightly for this long, he had never heard it talk. He had always pointed out the drinks he wanted. The voice had almost sounded like it had gargled with glass. "Not a problem," Gorath said, trying to strike up conversation. "So what brings you to this corner of hell?" "Waiting for someone," he quietly replied. Gorath then noticed the right hand. The one holding the drink was prosthetic. This was a uniquely human trait, as most creatures couldn't handle the shock of losing a limb. While Gorath had never met a human, he had heard about them. So that was what was sitting at his bar. About all Gorath could remember about humans was that they were tough to kill. Other than that, that really didn't stand out. From the apparent damage he saw as he looked at this human, that was very true. "You're a human, right? Don't see many of you out this way. Who are you looking for?" Gorath continued, intrigued by the individual before him. The human didn't even look up, just quietly muttered, "Yeah, I'm a human. Looking for Balrog, that frequents these parts." "Hope he is a friend," guffawed Gorath. "Humans can't take Balrog on a good day, and with that fake arm and eye, I suspect you're well past your good days." The human laughs, genuine humor in his voice. "That I am. Well past my good days." Gorath was starting to like this human. He had a friendly demeanor and made light of his injuries, something not very many could do. "What is your name?" he asked. "Bill Martin," the human replied, tight smile at his lips. "Well, Bill, it is a pleasure to make your acquaintance," Gorath replied, making a polite bow, one which was surprised Bill returned. As Gorath moved away, wiping down his bar and cleaning up, he couldn't help but feel some pity for the disabled human at the end of the bar. Fair Cal was not a friendly system, populated primarily by miners, pirates, and crooks. Most on this rock were dirt poor, barely making enough as miners to cover the cost of food. He figured Bill must have made money off this rock and was taking advantage of the low cost of living to live out his retirement after what Gorath assumed was a tragic injury. Most likely the source of that glazed look and the need to drink nightly, trying to bury a memory. Bill continued to visit Gorath every night, sticking to his set routine and chair. The days slowly dragging into weeks. Bill was never much of a talker, but he listened well. After a while, Bill was a friend to say hello to, but as regular as the scenery. He didn't draw out looks, but did get at the occasional look of pity as he limped to the latrine or others saw his prosthetic hand. Bill had been coming regularly for about a month when something happened. Gorath would never forget that faithful night. It was around 2000 when the bar doors opened, members of the trailing pirate cartel spreading in, 2 Balrogs and 3 Norren, the few patrons present quickly leaving upon seeing their arrival. One appeared to be ship captain. Gorath knew the sickening certainty of what came next. It happened every month. They were here for retention money. Gorath readied himself as the Norren captain approached the bar. He started with the traditional threats. Gorath, you know the drill. We need to arrange an accident for one of your patrons this time. Maybe the crippled up human in the corner. He snickered. At this, the 2 Balrogs began to approach Bull. Gorath was already lifting his hand, a bag of security money in one, when everything changed. You could feel the change in the very air, as though the warmth fled from the very room. Gorath was still looking at the captain when he heard one of the Balrogs trip over a chair, falling and crushing a table. A look of pure horror left on his face as he stared. Turning to see what he was looking at, Gorath no longer saw Bill, but where he had been now stood one of the strangest sights he had seen. Bill, still in his ragged clothing, was holding his drink in his left hand. His other, mechanical hand, had clamped itself around the skull of one of the Balrogs. Had Gorath not witnessed it himself, he would never have thought the disabled human capable. Bill drank his drink, a tumbler of earth whiskey, neat in a single shot, then crushed the Balrog's skull, fractured bones popping out the side as the sickening snap resounded across the hushed bar. Setting his glass down, the mechanical hand, no longer looking like a regular prosthesis, reached up and tore the rags from his body. As they fell away, a dark cloak enveloped Bill. As Bill turned towards the remaining pirates, he addressed the other Balrog, clearly ignoring the Norren. I've been waiting on you, Kalan. Do you remember me? He asked with a sneer. The realization was setting in with Gorath that Bill might not have been the prey that he had assumed. Kalan, the Balrog, obviously knew who approached him. He had already started crying and begging. The Norren seemed frozen, unsure of what was going on. As Bill moved, the shadow around him moved like a living being, showing glimpses of what was obviously power armor. What Gorath had assumed was prosthesis was clearly cybernetic. High-powered augments for natural components normally seen on shock troops and soldiers. The cause of his limp was suddenly obvious. One leg was also cybernetic, with the cloak twisting around behind him, seemingly dimming the lights as he approached the terrified Balrog, who was begging the much smaller Bill. The Norren captain started to recover from his shock and moved towards the darkened shade. Bill's look towards the captain, though, was also seen by Gorath. Gorath felt his veins freeze. The man standing in the middle of the bar, hands still covered in viscera of the Balrog, wasn't Bill. Even Gorath did not need a poster to recognize the terrifying visage of the Void. The dead eye with the red one, his bodily damage apparent, though most believed that he was some form of nightmare released from the depths of space. Rumor held he simply occupied a body. Normally, trailing pirates would already be drawing weapons on this attacker. They believed they owned the system. Only one of these Norren appeared to not recognize their assailant. A fatal mistake. Reaching for a weapon he would never make it to. The Void launched a chair with deadly force and accuracy. Both shattered into a pile of broken lumber and limbs. The Void never even looked away from the terrified Balrog at his feet. The Balrog at this point was crying. He may have been twice the size of his hunter, but he knew death when he saw it. You have raided ships bearing my protection. Those men were delivering goods to me. You stole from me and took men I promised safe passage as prisoners. I had a discussion with your slave friend. Let's just say it was high impact. But they gave me your name, Kaelin. The Void, his voice picking up in volume and developing an unnatural echo. All illusions of the handicapped old drunk fading away like the darkness when the sun rises. I was following orders. He's the captain, stammered Balrog while pointing towards the Norren. The Void's gaze followed the pointed hand. Without looking away, The cybernetic leg smashed down on the Balrog's chest with enough force to crack the floor underneath. The Balrogs are sturdy creatures. It takes a lot to kill them. Garoth later would realize in shock he had never heard of a Balrog killed by anything but plasma fire, except, of course, by another Balrog. From the look of it, the voids broke most of its ribs, destroyed its lungs, but somehow didn't stop its heart. Instead, it lay there, gurgling, slowly drowning in its own blood as the void turned away. The two remaining Noran began to react now, finally overcoming their shock and fear. Both pulled plasma pistols and opened fire. The void continued towards them, unfazed by the shots. At the last moment, the unnatural shroud he wore whipped up, swallowing the plasma whole. There was no splash of hot plasma, nor smell of burning flesh, metal, or clothing. Just the sudden absence of light from the rounds. As the bolts disappeared into the shroud, the void pulled something from his side and extended it. Easily 6 feet long, with a wicked-looking barb at the end. The weapon conjured images of the void's legendary ship, the Pequod, harpooning its poor victims. With a quick throw, the captain's last ally was pinned to the door. Only 2 feet of the spear was still visible in his chest. Another 2.5 feet stuck out the other side of the metal door. The captain, in desperation, began firing again, but the void shroud kept consuming his bolts. In his panic, he allowed the pistol to overheat. As he looked down at the broken firearm, the void stepped forward and reached out with his cybernetic hand, crushing the pistol and the hand the Noran captain held it with. The captain fell to the floor, screaming, mangled bits of hand and pistol still attached to his arm, but now at impossible angles and almost indistinguishable. "We are going for a ride, Captain," he said with finality. "We have much to discuss. But first, there is something that I must take care of," the void stated as he turned towards Gorath. The void paid his tab before he left. The void handed Gorath a red flag with a white skull and instructed him to hang it behind his bar. With that, the void grabbed the babbling captain and walked out the door. The captain begging for mercy and struggling. He was every bit as helpless as a newborn as this monster appeared to effortlessly drag him across the floor and out the door. Gorath never heard what the fate of the captain was, but he was fairly confident he didn't want to, regardless of the Noran captain's crimes against him. The police did come by and question him. They took images of the scene, then hauled off the bodies. Shortly after they left, a group of Trellan pirates showed up. This was the visit Gorath had dreaded. But it was a surreal experience. None of the usual threats of casual violence or execution thereof. They stopped, barely in the door, and one pointed at the flag in the background. The only question was, "Is that real?" Gorath confirmed it was, at which point the pirates apologized and left. Over the next month, more than a couple pirate vessels were found ripped apart, debris floating in space. All bore those hideous holes where a large metal harpoon had pierced them, like fish before being torn apart. After that month, things got extremely quiet. None dared fly the Trellan colors. Pirates began to avoid the system entirely. In fact, the risk of the void's wrath enough to discourage even the bravest. On occasion, Gorath would think back to the month he'd spent chatting and feeling sorry for Bill. He assumed Bill's handicaps and innocent demeanor were that of a scared, helpless human drinking away the horrors of his injury. Never would he have guessed that belying that veneer existed the horror-drinking feet from him. And on occasion, Gorath would smile and chuckle, remembering how he'd feared Bill's safety of Fairkull. Looking at the end of the bar, wrapped in rags and drinking the finest earth bourbon Gorath could find, sat the calm figure, still polite and friendly. Only Gorath knew what was really under those rags. Bill had started coming back a week or so after his exit with the captain. He would occasionally disappear, but seemed to enjoy drinking there, and Gorath was certainly not about to deny him that. Business in the bar had picked up after the void flag had gone up too. Rumor had spread like wildfire. He was guarded by the demon of space. Suddenly, the doors burst open. In walked 5 members of the nuclear organized crime circuit. One fired a plasma rifle into the ceiling, yelling for everyone to leave. From the corner of his eye, he saw Bill shoot down the last of his bourbon and scowl already on his face. Gorath sighed. He already knew that he would need a mop. End of story. I'd quickly like to thank the T5 peeps: Cold War Boomerwaffen, Severin Cerberus, Bushmaster 177, Henry the Red, Caspar Arnholtz, Cold War Boomerwaffen, Elijah Silvercross, Dragzoon WRE, and Severin Cerberus. Thank you very much.